2 left, and my son said the ones that are still alive are the ones with good personalities, so that's good,
Oh,
I guess. But the other ones weren't like terrible chickens. So anyway,
Wait, so they took out 4?
no, we had 4, now we have 2.
Oh, total. Okay.
Yeah. We had a raccoon get into our chicken coop last night and kill 2 of our chickens, and so we're working on how to improve chicken security. It'll be like, post 9/11 in the chicken world.
Exactly. You need like surveillance. Get Palantir. I don't know who's
Oh
involved.
God.
that's right.
Right.
Have you ever listened to Joel Salatin? He does great talks about chicken coops and all sorts of farm stuff.
Oh,
Definitely
really?
look him up.
Oh, interesting.
He is like largely responsible for red pilling me, actually. He was one of the factors in red pilling me. He calls himself a libertarian Christian capitalist farmer. He has a
I've
big
heard his
farm
name,
in
but I don't know
Virginia.
why. Okay.
Yeah, definitely look him up. He's
Okay.
great.
Salatin?
Yeah, Salatin, Salatin.
I'll write
And
it
he's
down.
full of actual farming advice. I mean, it's not just, he doesn't do politics. He just talks about land and land
Oh,
management and
that sounds
animal
cool.
husbandry and complains about government regulations of all of those things. It's very interesting. You'd be right up your alley.
That sounds great.
Has he been on the podcast that Nicole Shanahan has? Because she had that whole. I feel like she's maybe
Possibly,
been
yeah.
on. She talked a lot about like
I'm not sure, but it would make sense.
free
Totally.
land.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, Cody. Hi, Jesse. Hi, David. Hello, student of rhythm. Hello, morning cigars. Nice to see you guys today in the chat. Raccoon woes. It was a rough, violent night here, apparently, out in the chicken coop. So we are dealing with that today, but we'll deal with that after the live stream. We've got stuff to talk about. There was this crazy article. I mean, well, maybe I shouldn't preface it with my bias. I'm putting my bias right out. This article, The Trouble with Wanting Men. I tried to read this thing. I really tried. I finally got all the way through it, but I kept wanting to stop because I felt like it was, I'm blatantly biased. It was really hard to read, but I did get all the way through it. And after I did, I sent it to you guys, and I wanted to discuss. And Jennifer and Christine both had really strong reactions to this too. I hope Christine can join us. She might be joining late. Jennifer has a conflict that she couldn't get around, so she's not able to be here. But I can read what she said about it in a minute. Anyway, we might get Christine popping in a little bit late, or maybe not. But Jenny had a big response to it too. Deborah took notes, so we've got a lot.
Do you want me to do the solid ground thing? Because we didn't do it last week.
I definitely want you to. I was just going to preface that. Yeah, absolutely. I was hoping you'd do that before we launch into the conversation. I just wanted to.
I was like, we're ready to go.
You're ready to go. All right, Deborah, take it away. And I love your dress, by the way. You're so cute.
It's the topic. I mean, almost every podcast is talking about this story, so it's something in the zeitgeist. Anyway. Okay. Cool. So solid ground is a peer support community for anyone concerned about the imposition of critical social justice and or authoritarian measures such as medical mandates in their workplace, university, children's school, or community. We offer weekly online peer support groups in which members share ideas, thoughts, and support for how to navigate the impact of these ideologies and answer the question, where do we go from here? You can join our peer support groups for $10 a month, or you can join our forum on locals for $5 a month. To find out more, look for us on Solid Ground Substack for the peer support groups and Solid Ground Locals for the forum. Please note that Solid Ground does not provide psychotherapy or legal advice, and nothing we do should be construed as such.
All right. So I will say also on that note, our old live streams, if you go to our old ones, they still have a website link. We're no longer using that website. We just use the Substack and Locals. So I just want to stress what Deborah said there at the end. I'll put links in the description of this. It might take me a little bit to get that all uploaded after the live stream. But by the end of the day, there will be links. And if you go to the last few of our live streams over the last couple of months, it should have the correct links to Substack and Locals. I haven't gone back and edited everything to make sure that the website doesn't appear everywhere. But I sometimes still get communications from people saying they can't find Solid Ground online. And that's why, because we switched from using a website to using Substack. And so on the article, Jennifer's response, I'll just read really quickly. She says, "Oh, that blasted article. Girl, for some reason I could not read it all the way through. I tried 3 times. I don't know how to explain how it made me feel. Kind of sick and hopeless." And so, yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about this, but I'm really curious to hear what you guys thought. And Jenny, I know you put together a piece in response, but yeah, what do you guys think? What was you? Who wants to summarize?
Why don't you go, Jenny? Because you spent more time reading about this and writing about it.
Yeah, I did read it. I read it through a few times. So it's a woman called Jean Garnett, and she's in her early 40s and newly divorced. And she writes this piece that is set up in this really kind of confusing way. She's a book editor. She's a freelance editor. Her and her twin sister both work in publishing for really established publishing houses, and I can't remember their names now, but really like well-known ones. And it was like one of the first things that struck me was that this book editor really needs an editor. Like, this is like physician heal thyself. I couldn't believe that the New York Times, which I remember as having the most sort of surgical and hardcore editors I've ever known in my life, would allow something so rambly and confusing in their pages. Now, I'm gonna give some praise to the article first, which might come as a surprise if anyone's read my Substack or is familiar with my thoughts generally. There were actually some parts of that article that came kind of close to insight, and there was a lot of pathos in it, and I found it quite poignant. But the person was so narcissistic and muddled that she really undoes herself and ends up kind of creating the perfect example of what I would kind of cruelly call libtardation, like progressive confusion, and the sense that they can rewrite all norms and just have a grand old time. And oh my God, wait, it's not working. How dare the world not conform to my incredibly adolescent, if not childish, expectations? When she's talking, the things that I thought were true that she wrote about was this sort of how frustrating it is when you're a single woman and trying to date. And I experienced this in my 20s and my teens, not later than that, because I grew up, but where men are sort of feign helplessness and do this thing where they can't right now. They can't because they're not ready for a long-term relationship, or they can't because they're focused on work, super focused on work right now. And these are just ploys that men and boys use to keep women at bay and not be beholden to them emotionally, but still get laid, basically. And I have fallen for that many's a time. I've entered into these arrangements several times in my life, and so many women I know have as well. But that was then, okay? This woman's in her early 40s and has a young child. Now, the interesting part, and this is where she really buries the lead. So she starts out with this sort of what we would used to call in the business an anecdotal lead, which is like a no-no, or it's sort of like this sort of scene setting, and they're not getting to the point. And she starts off with with a date, but it's like buried way down. That then she reveals that she's newly divorced with a young daughter, and she was divorced because in her open marriage she fell in love with this partner that she had. And she had to leave the marriage because she couldn't handle the emotional burden of this, which actually, that is also an interesting point, right? That should be a tell. That's an interesting data point that she kind of like skips right over and doesn't give it another thought. So it's just full of this stuff. So then I went and did like a deep dive on her and found this 2022 piece that she wrote. Same. Even worse, actually, super lengthy and confusing about how her husband approached her to suggest an open marriage and how they were pursuing this. Now, obviously, between 22 and 25 and the end of her long-term marriage, she has become very jaded and sort of let down by these soy boy men that she's going after. And so she's introducing this term heterofatalism, because she goes to the academics, of course, and says, "Oh, what's this all about?" And they say, well, it's heterofatalism, heteropessimism as well. So straight women have a hard time finding men, as if this is some new concept. This is not a new concept. This has been the case since the 80s in New York City anyway. And then she just, again, another major sort of unintentional reveal where she goes on about how she's going after a particular type of man, and she's shocked to find out that this type of man has an inability to function in a very basic way because, you know, he's gentle and sweet and I'm forgetting some of the phrases. Oh, and he's mildly embarrassed by the fact that he's a straight man. So she's saying, I'm going after soy boys, and they get too much anxiety and they cancel the booty call. Okay. So she's unintentionally parroting herself and parroting the entire world that she lives in. And yet she seems to be thinking that she's actually going to get some sort of like validation from this. And in fairness, she probably got a lot of validation for it. And I bet you any money, the New York Times made quite a bit of money off of this article because it essentially went viral. So in a way, she's kind of succeeded in her mission, which is validating herself. But everyone else looking out from the inside, especially from the sort of right, which is not the great term for it anyway, it was really hit a nerve. It really hit a nerve with people like us who were former liberals or disaffected liberals or whatever you want to call us, people who are familiar with that world, and also true conservatives who are like, who is this hoe? Like, why is she so dumb? Right. Of course, now I'm not saying that. I genuinely am not saying that, although I was quite mean about her in parts of my article, in my own essay. But like I said, the part of me really feels for her because she is very much trapped in a worldview that is not serving her, as the young people like to say. And yet she's in her early 40s and she's really doubling down on it. So Deborah, I'd love to know your thoughts.
God, it's weird because part of me is like, I guess it is for clicks. I wanted to go, why did they even publish this? 100%. You know, it's so badly written, but it did, you know, and it got a lot of comments, and every podcast I know is talking about it. So, God, where do I even start? I mean, one of the things you talked about in your piece, Jenny, too, was, well, a lot of it was just maturity and growing up. And like, there's such an orientation towards, I desire, I should get what I desire. And I don't even know who these authors are, influencers. That's one of the things I wrote down. Like, who are the influencers these days? Like, where are people getting these ideas? I do know I was with a woman in another group the other day who was very upset because her manifesting wasn't working. And she was like, I'm not getting what I want. And this was like a spiritual group. And I'm just thinking, like, I said, I can't even get in that frame. Like, I just don't even. And so I don't know if it's a mix of this weird new agey spirituality, like, and if like I'm doing my life right, the desires are met. If there's this, you know, the sexual revolution, I do have sexual desires. I should get all of them. It was funny how that fed into also, are we subverting capitalism through this? And I thought you're approaching sex and relationship as a consumer experience. I mean, the whole thing is consumption, and like not seeing that. Those are some random. Oh, the other thing that just really grabbed me, I'm giving random things right now, it's not very coherent, is bitching a form of resistance, inventing a form of rebellion. So like they even think they're being political with this, and the lack of awareness of how obnoxious they are. And of course, nobody would want anybody behaving like this who thinks men is a tainted category. I mean, so I don't know. It was, I sat there and thought, how do these women get here? How do we get them out? Like, that was kind of where we probably have a lot to discuss before that, but like at the end of all of this, because it is so outrageous, I'm like, is there anything to be done with these women that are thinking this?
Well, you know, one of the things that I thought as I was reading it, first of all, the incoherence of it, like you say, Jenny, it doesn't flow. It's not a narrative that flows. She keeps on having these new bits of really important information drop that you know, present a story that could be connected, but you're left having to connect the dots yourself. So it is really a poor piece of writing. It just doesn't have any kind of real literary flow. It is also the debauchery that she herself continues to display. Oh yeah, I was in an open marriage. Oh yeah, I'm fucking around with every guy that I go on a date with. It's the third date and I'm describing our sex life already. I mean, we have been in a sexual relationship since date one, and we're on the third date. The new stranger that she meets at the bar that she then goes home with right away. And I kept thinking, you're criticizing men, and that's bizarre because you are punching holes in the bottom of the boat and then complaining that it's filling up with water. You are an agent of cultural destruction, what you are doing. And then when she finally gets to the point where she reveals that she has a daughter, I just about fell out of my chair. Like, this is a mother. This is a mother who went in for an open marriage after her baby was born, and then spends a bunch of her time detailing her exploits for everybody to read. So there's this written record for all eternity for her daughter to see. Her daughter's living it, but she also gets to grow up knowing what a low priority stability and family was for the people who raised her. And maybe I'm becoming conservative in my old age, but this is shocking. I kept thinking, it's not that bad. It's just that you're a hoe. You're just and you're describing these like awkward moments with these men who want to put you off. Oh, I'm just really busy. Well, he's just not that interested in you.
Right.
But if you serve yourself up on a platter, he's probably not going to say no to another romantic interlude if you're right there for it. But he's not that interested in you. You pointed out that that's a thing that men and boys do. It's a thing that women do too. It's people who are trying not to hurt the other person's feelings, trying not to slam a door shut, but kind of trying to like sideways exit a situation. Like, I'm just going to make excuses like I have to wash my hair, or,
I have to rearrange my sock drawer.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just one of those, she's getting those excuses from men, and she's thinking that there's a problem with men. And no, It's a problem that you served yourself up for sex on the very first date. You made yourself out to be an unserious partner, not somebody appealing for any kind of long-term relationship. So you've exhausted what that relationship offered that particular man. He's not interested in you. And
yeah.
And she wants to be she wants devotion. I mean, like how, I just don't know, like, you're going to get instantaneous devotion from some guy that you just met and negotiated your sex terms 5 minutes ago or something. Like how you think, like, there's no sense of the build of actually creating a relationship and building trust and being known or anything. It's so this, I don't know, the idealization of this and the way to get it is so off.
If this was written by a 25-year-old, it would have been a lot more forgivable. And it did resonate in some ways with the 25-year-old me. I'm going to be perfectly honest. The problem is that this woman is not 25. And also, actually, even more so, the problem is that this woman is taking these life lessons that a lot of women learned, especially in New York City, and instead of looking inward or looking outward outside of New York City to places where towns and communities are a little bit more conventional and a little bit more traditional, she goes running off to academia as if they are going to be able to tell her that, like, sorry, he's just not that into you. I mean, which is exactly what the issue is. And instead she's like, no, it's heterofatalism. Like, okay, that's ridiculous. Number one. And she's obviously, and also bear in mind, she works in the publishing industry, which is notoriously female dominated. It's notoriously punishing of men, pale, male, stale. They've been driven out of as authors. They've been driven out of the publishing industry. I was at a talk a few months ago that went through this very thing. They're excoriating of men. And then she's turning around and being like, why are they all so weak and like unwilling to commit? You're like, well, you are completely blind to your own role in this toxic dating situation. And then she meets a guy towards the end. You might not have made it down that far, Leslie. There's some random person.
I forget if it's the first
paragraph or some other piece, but he wants to have foursomes. Okay.
Yeah.
And they have this negotiation. They have a negotiation about the foursomes, and she's basically not into it, and she says it. And he says, that's totally valid. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that man is a sociopath. That man is a walking red flag. Okay. And she seems to have the good sense to, walk away from that. But isn't that just the absolute, like, apex of this madness that we have with polyamory and ethical non-monogamy, where, you can have these quite, let's say, niche and advanced, to be very euphemistic about it, practices, And when someone has a regular reaction of like, no, actually, I don't even know how that would work. How does 4 people even work? This passive aggressive sort of bureaucratic, like, yes, that's, your concerns are totally valid, response. And it actually made me feel really sorry for her. Like, I actually come away feeling sorry for her more than I feel anger at her, because she's so deep in this false belief, a whole false belief system, that I don't know how she's going to get out of that. And to your point, Deborah, I don't think they're ever coming out of this. I don't think they're ever coming out of this. I think this is going to be something that they're just going to age away, age out of. I mean, I don't mean the dating. I mean, they're just going to age away and not have recreated stable families that will perpetuate this lifestyle. That won't happen. So it will kind of extinguish itself eventually. But in the meantime, this draw, and it's so there's so much toxic femininity in here too, where you're sitting around with your girlfriends and they're validating your bad choices. And again, I'm not like criticizing this, like, oh my God, it's beneath me. Like I have done not all of this, but like some of the stuff that she's talking about, I have lived through myself. And I've been that friend who's been like, it's not you, it's him. And I've been the girl who's asked the friend, I've been on all of sides of this issue. But what they're trying to do is they're trying to emasculate men in their professional lives and in their personal lives. Then they get played by men because these men are disguising. There's like sociopaths and narcissists disguising themselves as male feminists. And then they just, this general immiseration occurs. And imagine a kid growing up in that world where it's like, you're confused because you're like, you have a dad and he's a nice guy or something. And then you're like, well, why is mommy so pissy all the time? And who's this new guy? And I mean, there's not a lot of modeling of healthy male-female relations going on. That's for sure. That's an understatement.
Yeah.
I want to say something about, is there a way out? And this is only one data point, but so there's somebody I know back where I lived in Boulder who posted this long thing the other day. They did the poly thing, and now they're like, I think I'm trying to find something in the middle, and they were like, but they didn't want to be judged. They didn't want to be judged. It's not that I'm not evolved that I don't want poly anymore, but I want like a committed partner, but like maybe we can do some kinky thing. So I don't know. I don't know if there are going to be she's one person, but I don't know if there are going to be some people who are kind of like, they don't really dig this anymore, and they've got to figure out how not to lose status by saying they don't want. So then they're like, I'm trying to find a thing. It's not really, what is it, ethical, not ENM, but it's kind of ENM, but so I don't know if people want to try that. It's you are
zeroing in on something that's so important, Deborah, which is what you're saying is like, the poly thing, I kind of want something different. Like, oh, if only it had a name. If only I could think of this brand new concept. It's called being in a relationship with one person, dummy. Like, this is what we've always done. And this is the problem. People in this like particular demographic, which is kind of a small demographic, but extremely influential culturally and even maybe politically, but very much so culturally. It's like the thought of just being normal is worse than death for them. Mm-hmm. The thought of being a boring, normal person is worse than death, and they will try to move heaven and earth to avoid that because that is lame and boring. So that's why trans kids is a thing. That's why ethical non-monogamy is a thing. And all of these things that are tearing at the social fabric are because the preponderance of this, the majority of this particular demographic is would do anything rather than just be. And this is what I said at the end of my piece, which was like, as much as I can understand up to a point the frustration in the dating world, because I've been there to a point. What you learn as you grow older and you have to make compromises and you have to make sacrifices and you have to confront disappointment and your life not turning out like you had imagined it when you were a girl and you dreamt of amazing career and like a hot guy, but who's also has all the right opinions but also can fix stuff and, like all, you have to tick every box. I mean, that's your middle school mentality. That's normal. And I'm not criticizing that when you're in middle school. That's how I wiled away my girlhood. But as you age and as you go through one life crisis and then another life crisis, and you lose things and you have to make hard decisions, and you ultimately end up in a place where you have to accept. You just have to accept. And you have to sit with the loss, and you have to sit with the pain, and you have to really think about, like, oh, wait, I got myself into this situation. That was me. I piloted this ship into the iceberg, and now I have to figure out how I can live with myself and rebuild from the wreckage, right? That was what happened to me in the last 15, 20 years or whatever. And that's how you mature, because you realize that there's not really any fixing it. Actually, there's not a lot of, I mean, the rumination is beside the point because it's done. And what you now have to do is accept, and you have to be still, and you have to just live with it.
I really appreciate that you're able to look at this woman's perspective and find some grace for it, because there's humanity on display here. I like the kind of Christian idea of love the sinner, hate the sin. What she's doing and the things that she's saying seem really kind of shockingly obvious to people who have matured past some of these phases. And it can be easy to want to condemn the person. And then also, you see this kind of red pill men versus feminist women kind of tropes online, where it's really easy to lump everybody into these broad categories and say it's liberal women, or it's women in general, or it's this generation of women, or whatever. But it's really not. It's phasic. And this might be I thought it was interesting. There was a comment in here that said that birth control pills may have some of this effect. And in going back to thinking about how the woman passes through the female maturation life cycle. You go from being this young woman who flowers into beauty and gets a lot of attention and has a lot of, somebody called it unearned coin or something like that. So it's this currency, this everybody looks at you, everybody wants you. And then you use that ideally and in a perfect world to find a good partner and to settle down and to become a mother and to start a family and then build through that. And then at some point you launch your kids, and then you move into the next phase of life, which is a little bit more independent, but without that sexuality aspect that you had when you were independent and young. So you move through this thing. And I wonder, when we are forcing women, or when women are encouraged and put on medication that kind of freezes them in this particular hormonal cyclical phase, I wonder if that has something to do with why a 40-year-old would still be in that 25-year-old phase. She's still, perhaps, presumably, if she's like average women who take hormonal birth control, she might be frozen in a state of underdevelopment. And that's just conjecture, but I couldn't help but bringing that up.
Yeah, I mean, that's very much a possibility, but everything in this particular culture is geared toward that as well. I mean, I think what Deborah was saying before about like, I like this need to reinvent the wheel, this need to be seen as evolved. Because don't forget, like, these people have been taught that a heterosexual monogamous marriage is the patriarchy, and it's like kind of like the font of all evil. And this is another thing I was pointing out. It's like she is noticing, okay? She's noticing how this is not working and how she wants a real man. Fundamentally, she's like, these guys are like cucked soy boys. And even though they were kind of good in the sack for a minute, now they can't even be bothered leaving the house to like meet me to have sex again. And this is disappointing. And yes, I would imagine that would be very disappointing. But she's like, where are the real men? Where are the real men who'll do the hard things? You're like,
they're not looking for another hookup with you, honey.
They're not in New York. I mean, maybe they are in New York City, but they're not. You're not going to even notice one because, and I put in my piece, like, horror of horrors. Maybe they're all Trump voters, and in which case you're never getting laid again, because you would never consider a plumber. You would never consider a cop. You would never consider a truck driver. You would never consider any of those men because you are a snob, you are an elitist, and you have probably never even met a man like that. So forget about it. Like, you are 100% the author of your own misery in this case. But But it's like this is the frustrating part of it, is because her human female nature is literally like trying to break free, but the societal programming and the pressure is too strong, and so she continues to make the mistake after mistake after mistake. And funnily enough, her other piece in the Paris Review about the open marriage, which is actually quite poignant as much as I could figure out, because it wasn't her idea, but she's very telling, this little piece about her then baby daughter, or toddler, who was being defiant, and she's describing this sort of showdown with her, what I'm thinking is a toddler, and how she's saying, I don't like it when you hit me, or I don't like it when I can see you're upset, and you're trying to, she's like, and I was going through the phrases from the book, but the fucking book wasn't working. And I was like, that's because the book is wrong, you dummy. Listen to your instinct. Forget about the book. Why are you going to an academic to talk about how to have a happy relationship? Find a middle-aged or old married couple and ask them. Okay? It's like you have to constantly turn to these pseudo experts who are the real problem. They're the real evildoers, I suppose, in this scenario. But because these people are so elitist and so credentialist that they can't listen to their own soul and their own psyche and their own instinct, and so they make an absolute disastrous mess over all of their personal lives. Yeah, and they never grow up.
I loved what you both were pointing out about anti-normalism, this sort of idea that we have to break paradigms, we have to break patterns, we can't be normal. And it's interesting, like if you take a pattern and you break it, and you do something that's different, and then you cry about the fact that now the pattern is shattered and you can't predict what happens next. Like I have chaos all around me because I created chaos, because I took something that was predictable and I changed it, and now I'm upset that it didn't just change in the way that I wanted it to, that I introduced new things to the system. And I think about how looked down upon in my counselor training about human sexuality, how looked down upon heteronormativity was. It was the thing that we were to challenge as counselors. Heteronormativity was the one big bad thing. There was support for, you had to be kink positive, you had to be fetish positive, you had to be embracing of all the different ways that people do things. We learned about polyamory, we learned about trans. In fact, I don't know why my camera does that thing, sorry, but the bit on trans, we spent about 2 weeks on it in a human sexuality course, which was probably, 8 or 12 weeks long. It wasn't that long. So wow. We spent 2 weeks on trans. And we had to watch a movie that was about how trans people have always been here and how they've been really disenfranchised over time, and how we have to feel a lot of empathy for them. And the topic of a person coming out as trans to their partner. So a male to female individual coming out to his wife to let her know that he is going to be trans now. If he is rejected by her, how hard that is on him and what a villain she is. So that was the framing that we were given. If you go on a date and you're a man and you bring home a woman, and she turns out to be she turns out to be trans, and then you reject her, how hard that is on her, the trans woman, and what a villain you are for rejecting and for having genital preferences. So we didn't look at the experience from the other perspective. Like, what is the experience for a woman whose husband makes this kind of announcement? What is that like for her? In a counseling program, we never looked at that. We only looked at what is it like for the iconoclast, the person who breaks the paradigm, and what is that experience of breaking normal. And I even spoke with a young woman from a counseling program who she was on a pegging forum trying to get people to involve in this fetish, because she had done it once and didn't like it, but she wanted to break through that because she wanted to be able to support her kink partners. She wanted to be able to find people to help her break through her dislike of this thing. And so she was leaning into her dislike of this particular act in order to be a better counselor and be a more kink positive and sex positive counselor. So this was the way people were being trained. So yes, there's a real, if you've been educated and if your peer base is supporting this and you say, I think I just want something vanilla, then you're going to feel a lot of shame retreating into that. And that is really interesting. That is really pervasive in some areas of our culture right now.
Do you guys remember, I don't actually, Deborah, I don't think you were on, but a few years ago, Leslie, you had me on to talk about non-monogamy from the perspective of my parents.
Yeah.
And one of the, because that was the scenario that my parents had when I was a child. And I remember making the point, and I've made it elsewhere, is that, so there are people who are able to live outside norms. They exist, okay? They always have existed. And there's always been a counterculture. There's always been an underworld. There's always been a bohemian set that lives by its own morals or lack thereof. And I would say that my parents were in that category. They were successful at it, for the most part. But what's happened was through academia and through the culture, and the queering of education, we now are pushing this on all people. And normies cannot handle this. Okay. I am a normie, right? I grew up to be a normie, but I did not grow up in a normie world. So I know from what I speak.
What's a normie?
I've seen the good.
If you can identify normie for the
Normie is just, I want one marriage partner, and I don't want ethical non-monogamy. I don't want to be on a pegging forum. I'm just like, I'm vanilla. Okay. I just want to be married and like live my life. But if you try to introduce, if you would go in with the assumption that all people are secret or closet freaks, and we need to liberate them, that's actually I personally find it like borderline, actually not even borderline. I find that actually straight up demonic. You're messing with people's psyches, and you're trying to reprogram their instincts. And I genuinely find that horrifying. I am not exaggerating when I say it's sort of implicitly extinctional. I don't know if that's a word. Mm-hmm. You're trying to extinguish your own internal compass. You're trying to extinguish how the human race has propagated itself for millions of years. You're trying to extinguish life itself. I genuinely think that. And if you think I'm being hyperbolic, I am not intending to be hyperbolic. So we have this very disordered mainstream now. Everyone's running around being like, oh, I guess I'm a boy. I guess I'm a girl. Oh, who knows? A gender assigned at birth. And, we'll reinvent all of these terms. I mean, and I wrote in this piece, like the term heterofatalism, when I actually got down to it, I was like, what is this? I was like, you know what it is? It is literally, it just means what you feel when you discover something you wanted ain't all it's cracked up to be, which is something everyone's grandma always knew. Okay. It doesn't need an academic to give it a moniker. Okay. It just means, oh, you thought you wanted something, and then you got it. And then it turned out to not be all that. Welcome to the human race, you absolute moron. Okay. Grow up. Stop looking, like chasing down these rabbit holes for this magical idea of fulfillment, and just live, just be. Stop caring, stop thinking, stop trying. And I see this so often in women of our demographic, our age, and educated and living in cities and in liberal communities. I see it so often, this sense of like never ending angst and like, oh, I should be worried about this person or this group, and just this inability to just be like, I'm lucky I am alive. I am lucky to exist. I am lucky that I have all 4 limbs. I'm lucky that I have a couple of kids or good friends or a nice place to live or whatever it is that you have in your life. Like, no, instead we have to run around and feel bad about ourselves all the time because we've been programmed that being normal is bad and it's somehow a sin. That's insane.
It's speaking of rabbit holes, one rabbit hole to go down is the sexology rabbit hole, and how much influence sexologists have on our modern, I guess, human sexuality education. And one of the premises of the work of secular, these people who consider themselves specialists in studying human sexuality, is that any kind of shame or guilt is a bad thing, and needs to be undone. So there's no such thing as a bad kink or a bad fetish unless it violates somebody else's consent. So as long as everybody agrees to it, and you can even use money to get that agreement, so which is, I would say, a form of coercion. If I won't do it for free, but I'll do it for $200, did I really give my consent, or was I in a position where I needed $200 more than I needed to protect myself from that thing, or 1,000 or whatever? So I would say that payment is a form of coercion for sex. But this idea that as long as you have consent, people can do anything that they want. And if the barrier is discomfort or moral judgment or disgust or shame or embarrassment of some kind, then that is the problem. And we must attack the emotion and overcome that so that we can lean into the act. Because if you want it at all, if it's arousing or erotic to you at all, but you have some kind of a shame or embarrassment barrier, disgust barrier, that barrier is the problem, and you need to overcome that to do the thing. And that seems to be the premise of sexology.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was talking about before. You have to override your instincts. This is the entire project. Override the instincts that have kept us alive and going for millions of years. That's why we tell little girls, like, oh, well, if you see a man in a dress, it's not a bad man. No, it's a girl. And you have to trust that, you have to believe that person instead of your natural revulsion instinct. And like this woman with her kid, she wants to just like say, no, this is the way it's going to be, and be the more powerful one, which is what she should be. And she says no. And then she was like, well, I want a real man. But like every time she has an instinct, she has to talk herself out of the instinct. That's the exact same project, Leslie, that you're talking about. The reason you feel shame after doing something is because you shouldn't have done it. Okay, that's why you feel shame. That's your kind of autoimmune reaction to it. It's there for a reason.
The only slight thing I can say about that, imagine you grew up in a culture, I don't know whether it was heavily religious, and it was like the statements were like any sexual feeling or any of that is all the work of the devil, and you shouldn't have any like arousal at all, and that's bad. So in that case, I could say someone could have some shame coupled with sex in a way that probably doesn't need to be there, as opposed to I'm doing something extremely bizarre and unnatural and I feel ashamed about it. And you're like, yeah, because that's like unnatural and you shouldn't be doing it.
I think that's such a good point. And I think that's one of the things I really wanted to get out of counseling education when I was studying human sexuality in particular, is a sense of how do we as a cultural enterprise, how do we define what actually is healthy and normal? What is good? Can we define that? Because if you can define that, then you can point to when it's gone too far or when it's being repressed too much, on either end of the spectrum. Can we define? It doesn't seem like it would be that hard to identify what is a societal good? What is something good? Maybe it's raising children who feel secure, and maybe we point to children as that thing. But then, we're not allowed to do that because there's all these caveats, all these what ifs. What is a good in society when it comes to relationships? And it feels like we have failed to do that. We can point at everything else, but what we've come to right now is it's good to support people's whims. Feeling
it's
good,
good to feel good.
Avoiding pain, not feeling bad, never feeling troubled about anything. Those things are good. So as long as it makes you feel good, it's good. And that there's nothing worth sacrificing for.
Exactly.
If you have to sacrifice any of that, then now you've entered the territory of bad, repressive, etc. So, Deborah, I really appreciate that point, though, because there are times when we could look at that and say, oh, that seems like that's a bit repressive. But what are we anchoring that on? Right now, nothing's anchored on anything except that.
Yeah. I mean, you're probably not that many families that are having, but I still know people, adults who had a lot of shaming around anything sexual, like at all, who haven't necessarily been able to shake all that. So, But yeah, the queering thing is just queering, meaning basically bringing everything that's not the norm into the center and pushing the norm out as the problem. And I guess the liberation that comes with that too, this presumption that normative behavior is all some sort of oppressive structure, as opposed to how human nature would align itself to function well. And yeah, I mean, she talked about, there was actually, she said something about maybe queer is the way out, because she was like, how am I going to get myself out of this? And there was another thing she said about, I don't know, just again, this not wanting to, oh yeah, and the old way of mating is dead. Like this, again, this not wanting to be normal and having to be liberated and having as much freedom as possible, as opposed to having anything that might come from some sort of steady connection that requires sacrifice or requires, you going beyond what I want this second.
Yeah. I put a note up on the Substack Notes app about this before I wrote my essay. And this woman commented, because about that point where she's sort of like intimating, in the author of this essay is sort of hinting at like, oh, if only I could be gay. Like, oh, and this woman was a lesbian. She's like, I find this so irritating. I come up against this in straight people all the time. Again, because, to be straight is to be boring. Unless you're a spicy straight and you do nonsense, you have to, then they're sort of like, oh, you're so lucky you're gay. And like this lesbian woman was like, this is a very frustrating and extremely patronizing attitude. And I would imagine it would be like, it's a bit like, white people fawning over black people. Nobody, the sort of the protected group actually chafes against the protection because it's incredibly infantilizing. And again, it just comes back to this woman, not young woman, behaving and thinking and viewing the world like a teenager. Like the world is there to meet her whims, number one, and number two, to validate her with by giving her attention through these terribly written think pieces.
Okay, so in the chat we have David LeBoy saying, not everything is consensual is a good idea. Money equals coercion is a road I promise you don't want to go down. And to that I said that sex is what I was specifically referring to. Not money is coercion in general. No, regarding sex. And he wants to know, why does that only apply to sex? And this is an interesting argument that you get a lot when we talk about sex work, which I think is a terrible euphemism. I think you should just call it prostitution, whether it's for visuals or directly. You're still performing prostitution, whether you're doing pornography, doing OnlyFans, or engaging with customers sexually. Sex is different than hiring somebody to mow your lawn or build your house or do your plumbing. It's different. It's an entering into a person's body in the most primal and intimate way that a person can share themselves. It's the most intimate act. It has the power to create life. It is a different act than other acts that we perform with our bodies. It's
not a commodity.
No, it shouldn't be. Mm-hmm. No, it's like, I don't know why we have to define that in academic terms when it's something that we all know.
Yeah, I no harm to David, the commenter, but I'm like, do we really need to spell this out? Do you really need an answer to that question? I mean, is that how far we are down this road of rationalization and materialism, that you have to be like, well, why is it different? Like, oh my God, hire a babysitter. I'm like, no, like, I'm sorry. I don't like, really? Or aren't we adults here? Like, have we not all experienced the highs and lows of sexual intimacy and understand that to open up as moral and good payment for that is an obvious road to, I want to say hell, but I don't mean it in the religious sense. Hell on earth. I mean, isn't that really obvious? Like I find it frustrating that the terms have been reset so profoundly in this issue.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's like we have to go back and redefine basic things. Like, this is a book. This is a glass. This is, I am a female. I'm like, really? We have to spend we've been doing this for years now. How many more years do we have to re-explain the world to people? Like we're in kindergarten.
Yeah. Oh gosh, this is funny. Ash Brown talking about normativity. Leslie, do you own any normal drinking vessels? Thank you, Ash. I don't know.
Touche.
I'm drinking out of a mug that I made, so that's
beautiful.
I don't know if that's normal or not, and a jar. So I guess maybe I don't own normal drinking vessels. Yeah, it's a really interesting point that comes up so often, and I like what you're saying, Jenny, about how this whole thing, it stems from this commodification of sex and this breaking down of all kinds of emotional or cultural barriers to sexuality.
Yeah.
And it is inherently anti-life. It's targeting the source of life, the source of human life, for commodification, for demystification, for materialization. So we're just taking the thing that makes that holds our secret, our greatest source of intimate connection and life-giving energy and power, and we're laying it splayed open and bare for all to see, all to enjoy, all to do whatever they will with. And there's something so blatantly anti it's anti the very life force. It's like the snake eating its tail.
Yeah. No, I mean, and I see that Dave's saying, don't be insulting. I don't mean to insult you, David. I don't. I'm expressing frustration because, you're chafing against what we're saying because you're perceiving it as you say, you are making rules for me. Well, yeah, kind of. I mean, also I'm making the rule that you can't murder somebody. Like, oh, wow. Are you chafing against that as well? I mean, these are primal things. This is not a commodity issue. I'm not making a rule where you can spend your money or not spend your money. And I'm not making a rule. I'm expressing moral judgment. That's what I'm doing. I'm expressing a moral judgment on people who see things differently because I think that road is dangerous and anti-human, like you just said, Leslie. Okay, I don't know where this person lives. Maybe there are no rules against prostitution where he lives. Maybe there are. But I am judging. I'm judging you for the moral clarity that you don't seem to have because you think that just because you're putting brakes on your sexual needs is somehow an imposition on your freedom. I'm sorry, it's not. Mm-hmm. If you can buy a woman for sex or buy a man for sex, why not buy a child for sex? Why not buy an animal for sex? I mean, at a certain point, and everyone said back in the 80s, oh, the slippery slope is a fallacy. Well, look where we are now. Mm-hmm. And tell me that the Christians were not right. Look where we are.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, if you can make justifications for eroding the boundaries that we've already eroded, then why not those other ones? Why not? I mean, it was just recently when we spoke with, what's her name, Naomi Best, who's the counseling student from Santa Clara, who started talking about some of the stuff that she was being taught in her counseling sexuality courses. They addressed bestiality. They addressed what kind of lube you'd need to use with what kind of animal in her counseling program. There's open embracing of BDSM, where they have BDSM representatives, I don't know what they're called, dominatrix or whatever, come in and teach courses. And they, as a class, I think, didn't they visit a dungeon, or they had like videos for them on it? What's that, Deborah?
Field trip.
A field trip, right. So if it's...
You got to get a permission slip from your dom to go to the...
But what's in that word? What's in the phrase? I mean, it's so cutesy to call something by an acronym. But bondage and sadism and masochism? Like, I want to hurt you and I enjoy hurting you. Or I want you to hurt me and I enjoy that you're hurting me. And I want you to bind me so that I can't move of my own free will. That's what those words mean.
Yeah.
And that's being promoted. And we have all kinds of like crazy sex positive therapists everywhere that are just promoting that crap. So if you can do that, then why can't you add normalization of pedophilia? Why not? Why not? If you can normalize and accept and embrace that people want to hurt each other to get their jollies, that's okay. To want to hurt each other. Yeah. So why not break down that last barrier? So yeah, I agree with you. It is terrifying that we can't just sit down and say what is normal and what is good and try to promote that. And it doesn't mean that you have to demonize people who deviate. Like you said, Jenny, there's always going to be bohemian people. There's going to be people on the fringe. If we can point to what is good, and it doesn't mean that you make illegal everything else. It just means that you work towards promoting what is good and healthy for people. But we can't even say what that is. We can't even say that.
And notice every time we have this conversation, there's always someone in the comments, and it's usually a man, who is like, but you're impinging on my freedom. I'm like, well, that is what being an adult entails.
Limitations.
You don't get to do whatever the hell you want at any moment that you want simply because you have the hard cash to do it or because you have a willing partner. Harms can be done, and you need to practice self-restraint. You need to practice self-denial sometimes. I mean, like, if you don't, you're not an adult. You're just not. And everyone fails. Everyone falls down. Everyone indulges in things they shouldn't do. We all do it, and we always have. We always have. But there used to be we always have. There used to be a moral superstructure that punished you to some degrees, to too much, definitely punish you too much for stepping outside that. Now the moral superstructure is pushing you to transgress. And that means there has to be a backlash. I'm sorry. There has to be a backlash. For all the porn users and all the whoremongers, there has got to be a backlash, and it is coming because it has to readjust. And we know there was a time in my lifetime where there was somewhat of a happy medium. You could still be somewhat transgressive, and you could still be somewhat free. You could be very free, actually. You could be entirely free. And there was still the kind of guardrails that I always talk about, which, you could also call the moral superstructure, that like everyone else was just being normal and everything was kind of ticking along imperfectly, but it always has ticked along imperfectly, but not anymore. Now, because of these demons, these sexology demons, and these queering of the mind demons are coming in, and they're saying, no, it's not good enough to have any normie society. We have to make everyone a freak like us. And I'm sorry, that means that individually we have to practice more restraint.
Deborah?
I just want to say a quick thing. There's the comment about the BDSM, and there's the 50 Shades of Grey, but I do wonder how much, and I think that people have said it may be more of a practice in like left-wing thinking, insofar as we have this oppressor, this is really bad, power is being abused. Would it not be surprising that then what people would take on in their sexual private practices is playing with these power differentials, because it's so not allowed? Like it's sort of like a projection. It's like, oh, it can't have in the world that there's an oppressor, but in my private whatever, I'm actually more drawn to be in these more power differential situations. So I think some of it might arise from this political viewpoint of power is so terrible, and then people want to act it out like erotically or something.
That's super interesting, Deborah. And as you were talking, it made me think about how, you have this so-called traditional perspective in Western culture anyway, where a man is I shouldn't say so-called, it's traditional. Man is the head of the household, and the woman holds I don't know, I don't go in for the completely submissive perspective, but a somewhat submissive perspective to the husband, dominant husband, supportive wife kind of framework. And if you can't do that, and in fact, academically and culturally, we've been taught to really subvert that, put the man, not just a little, not like man is here, woman is here, but put the woman all the way up here and squish that man all the way back down. And now you have this sort of choking thing that's happening in as a massive epidemic of porn-fueled violence against women that's just basic, where you hear young women a lot of them have horror stories of being choked by a casual sexual partner. And then you hear men say, well, women are asking them to do that. So there's this kind of role flip that represents almost a pendulum swing back. But instead of being this healthy balance where we're kind of hovering in here, we're swinging from here all the way to here, and it's like the thing that gets suppressed will burst out in a dysfunctional way. If you push something down enough, it bursts out somewhere unhealthy. So Clue Studio has asked, and I know we're at time, but I wonder, Clue Studio says, can we define queer? I honestly don't know what it means. Does anybody have a quick one for Clue? Thank you, Morning Cigar, for the super chat. Thank you, Clue Studio.
I don't know how good a definition this is, Leslie. You might be able to do a better job, but the way I understand it is undermining and breaking all norms,
Right.
specifically around sex, but that radiates out into even something like defunding the police. It's a process by which you reprogram your instincts to desire and sort of free. That's what they would say, free your desire to engage in whatever it is you want, and there's no prohibition on that, specifically to break the traditional bonds of traditional society, i.e. the parent-child, husband-wife, family, state, and break the family altogether, and therefore kind of create this entirely liberated utopia. But what happens in practice is it creates a dystopian hell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and my mom used to say, she used to use the word to mean, when I was a little kid, I can remember having to watch out for queer men in the bathrooms. Was what we'd go to, there was a public swimming pool, and the reason she wouldn't let me go into the bathroom by myself, I'm probably like 4 years old, was because there might be queer men in the bathrooms. And so it meant, back then there was this connotation that it was basically like child molesters, it was perverts, it was something bad. And so,
or gays. I mean, it was always used as a slur for homosexuales.
Yeah, but I think it
they
meant
appropriated that.
General sexual aberration would have been lumped under that category, because she very much meant people who might prey on a little girl in that context. So it's interesting to hear it's one of those words that's been reclaimed by a group of people in order to take something that would have been a slur and hold up as a label of pride.
Political identity.
Political identity. I hope that's helpful. Yeah, Tony Walls, queer used to mean weird. Just plain old weird. Yeah.
That's true, yeah. Actually, that's right. Yeah.
Mrs. My grandma defined as perverts. Yeah. So there you go. So I guess now that there's no such thing as perversion, because it's all to be embraced, it's basically means the same thing. It's just now a good thing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for a really intense discussion. Really interesting. A lot that's come up from this article. I should have reread it right before. I intended to sit down and reread it right before we came on and go back to some of the points that really stood out to me. But unfortunately, raccoons killed 2 of our chickens right before I came on, and I was busy doing something else. But Jenny, I'll link to your article in the description of this video once I get all of that done. So you guys can go and read Jenny's article. I'll link to the original as well for reference, so people who haven't read it yet can go and familiarize themselves. And Deborah and Jenny, thank you so much for the conversation. And thanks everybody for being with us. I just say
really quick, if you do go to the Substack, make sure you read the comments, because the comments on this particular essay are great. And thank you as always, Leslie and Deborah.
Awesome. See you guys next week.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.